Do you guys ever have those moments where you just feel like, I can't read the word, I don't really feel like praying, I don't really feel like going to church? You just feel this like sense of not necessarily heaviness, but separation from God or hardness of heart, maybe even an extreme way of looking at it, right? There is a scripture that I think identifies the solution, not every single time, but often for somebody who's going through a season like that. Now, I will say there are times where God does allow us to just go through a season of spiritual dryness. And for whatever purpose, for whatever reason, he allows us to do that. But then I also believe that sometimes we are responsible for taking almost a self-examination of where we are in life, like what we're doing, what season we are in, what we're prioritizing. And so in 2 Corinthians 13:5, Paul writes something that I think identifies this and makes it very clear. And I'm going to share it with you guys real quick. And I'm going to read out of the ESV. Paul says, "Examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourselves. Do you not realize this about yourselves, that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail to meet the test?" So what he's saying here is that you got to be able to examine yourselves to see whether you are operating in the faith. And I would ask you to take that inventory within your own life. Are you showing up to church to release some sort of maybe guilt of, all right, I'm just going to kind of check the box of going on Sunday today? Or am I going to be able to use the gifts that God has given me to edify the people around me? Or am I going to worship God in reverence because I want to be spiritually nourished and be in this posture of just being able to worship God? And not everybody's going to be, on that end of the spectrum of their faith. But oftentimes we can get to this place where we're like, I'm not hearing from God. I don't feel like praying. I don't know what's going on. And in those moments, what I believe is that's an invitation from the Lord to be able to take inventory of the decisions that you are making throughout your recent time leading up to those moments of spiritual dryness. I will say it's not always like that though, right? We don't want to live in this place of spiritual paranoia where we're constantly going within, where we're constantly reflecting, where we're constantly going and saying, am I doing this wrong? Am I doing this right? I think when it's prolonged and we're recognizing, hey, I'm in this spiritual dryness and I don't know how to get out of it, that's when maybe the Lord will allow those experiences to show you, hey, you're placing this in front of me. Hey, you have this idol that I'm trying to convict you of. The process of sanctification is us surrendering to God to allow him to change us, right? To mature us, to make us more like Christ. And if we don't surrender to that, we can hinder the process and it can take a very long time, or we can be in full surrender to it and it can quite literally be a much more smoother and quicker process, right? We're always going to be sanctified through the rest of our lives. We're always going to be consistently casting off the old self and putting on the new self. But I do think that we can hinder and block those based on the decisions that we make every single day. And so it could be something good that maybe is in front of our relationship with the Lord, like fitness, right? We could be constantly prioritizing our gym schedule or making all of these goals according to our health and fitness and scheduling this gym time and doing this workout and that workout. And God may be saying, you don't need to be at the gym 90 minutes a day. You don't need to be doing this excessive, plan and nutrition. You need to rely on me and take care of your health in a way to where you're not putting fitness and good things as an idol in front of your relationship with the Lord. Because maybe you're at the gym 30 minutes a day and that's great. And now God's able to use the rest of that 60 minutes and get you in the Word, right? And so I believe that there is this balance and this honest inventory that needs to happen in all of our lives, right? We can't live and just sit and read the Bible for 12 plus hours a day. Although I've gone through seasons where God has allowed me to do that, right? Where I could sit there, and this is actually one of the first Bibles I ever did that with. I've had seasons where I could just sit there and read this, and sometimes there would be an entire day where I'm just like, wow, like I'm learning so much, and for whatever reason, I'm wired in that way to find joy from learning and being educated. That's not a lot of people may be like that, and that's fine. But I do think the Lord allows us to go through certain seasons of life and gives us certain circumstances to then show us where we may be needing to alter some things in our lives, or maybe where we need to surrender more in our lives, right? Now, obviously, if we're living in unrepented sin, or if we're ignoring the convictions of the Holy Spirit, eventually the Lord is going to give us over to that, in a form of a hardness of heart for some, if it's an extreme sin, right? If we're living in unrepented, sexual immorality, or we're just completely being rebellious, then obviously God is going to give us over to like what the Bible would say in Romans 1, a depraved mind and a hardness of heart. But I think that's more of an extreme version of what I'm getting at in this video, which is more so you're walking the Christian faith. You're trying to grow closer to God. You're trying to do the right things, but then you just sense this season of heaviness, or you sense this season of, a lack of passion, or you're in the Word and it's just not speaking to you at all. I would then say in those moments that you're not given over to a depraved mind. I would more so just say examine how you're structuring your day. Examine the little decisions, right? How are you moving throughout your day? What do you have planned? What decisions are you making? Because maybe within something there could be one little thing that God's just trying to get your attention on, and it could be a quick change, and all of a sudden you're in the right direction again, right? How else is God going to get our attention if there's something within us that either we're believing or thinking or doing, or if there's something that we're going to that God does not want us to be part of? How else are we going to know unless we take that time to take inventory of what we're actually doing? So yeah, I would just invite you, when you're in those moments of what seems like spiritual dryness, go to the Lord and say, is there something within me that I'm doing, thinking, or believing that is creating this spiritual heaviness? And again, maybe it's not. Maybe God has you in that season for a specific reason, where he's just asking you to trust and rely on him even more. Or maybe he's even asking you to enjoy some of his creation, right? We often think of like the hustle culture movement in our society, especially in North America, where we have to grind and work all these hours and do all these things to flaunt our materialism. Maybe somebody stepped out of that and they're in the faith now, and God's just trying to show them, hey, enjoy some of creation. You don't have to be this type A, constantly grind mode, get things done. Somebody could be spiritually prideful and spend a majority of their life and time just constantly doing things that are spiritual. And God may say, hey, these are great things, but don't let that control and consume you. Have some balance in your life, right? I can name 1,000 examples, but what's important is the underlying message of this topic, which is being able to develop your relationship with God by taking self-inventory. Examine yourselves, as Paul would say, that you are within the faith, that you're not allowing something to come within your relationship with God that's now taking precedent. That's the number one thing. Even though in your mind you're going to say God's first, I love Jesus, and you might say all the right things, but in your actions, when you're sitting there, you're recognizing that there's a spiritual dryness or deadness when it comes to doing the things that you feel called or want to do, right? May not necessarily be always called to do, but as Christians, we're always called to read the Word and pray and be around others who are of the faith. But you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. When we're able to recognize those moments where it's like, all right, I feel like I'm missing the mark on this, or I feel like I just don't want to do any of this stuff today. That's an invitation for you to then open that door and say, Lord, what is it within me? What is it I'm doing today? What is it that I've been engaged in? And if there is something that comes up or you feel convicted of, make those decisions and watch how things change for you as you now sit down and start to try to read the Word. And so sanctification is a process, and the more we surrender to it, the quicker we're able to get over the little things that God may want to teach us. He may want to continue to refine us in a way that, there's something within us that is blocking that process to be refined. And so, yeah, that's my invitation for you guys. 2 Corinthians 13, if you want to read it. Again, it was 2 Corinthians 13:5. But, yeah, if you guys got any value out of this video, feel free to subscribe. It's a new channel, or leave any questions or comments down below. I'm glad you guys were able to tune in today.